Hello, steady Taurus. Something subtle may be shifting around you today, and what makes it important is not how loudly it arrives, but what it quietly asks you to value differently. A relationship, responsibility, or goal that once felt completely familiar may suddenly carry a different emotional weight, as though the room itself has not changed, but the light coming through the window has. You do not need to name that change immediately. For now, it may be enough to notice where your attention keeps returning. Over the near future, that awareness could become stronger through an interaction that unsettles your usual sense of certainty. A difficult conversation, a difference of opinion, or even a moment when someone responds in a way you did not expect may encourage you to examine what you truly need from the people and situations receiving your energy. The discomfort does not automatically mean something is wrong. Sometimes friction simply reveals where two needs, values, or expectations have stopped moving at the same pace. What matters is whether you can stay present long enough to understand what the tension is showing you. There is also the possibility that someone around you begins to affect you in a surprisingly motivating way. Their confidence, perspective, or willingness to approach life differently could awaken a desire in you that has been quiet for some time, especially around work, personal direction, or a choice you have been considering but not yet making. This does not mean you need to follow their path or abandon your own rhythm. Their presence may simply remind you that stability and movement are not opposites, and that sometimes protecting what matters requires allowing it to evolve. That distinction feels especially important for you now, Taurus. You may naturally want to know that something is worthwhile before investing your time, trust, attention, or resources in it, and there is wisdom in that instinct. But there can also be moments when waiting for complete certainty becomes another way of remaining attached to what is already familiar. Today invites you to notice that boundary without judging yourself for where you find it. Some of the most useful information may arrive when things become quiet. A few minutes alone, a page of unfiltered writing, a slow walk, or simply sitting somewhere comfortable without filling every empty space can make certain patterns easier to recognize. You may begin to see how an older experience has influenced what you now call security, or why you continue tending something long after it has stopped giving much back. That kind of recognition does not demand an immediate decision. It gives you a clearer place from which future decisions can grow. As the day unfolds, pay attention to both connection and resistance. A warm exchange may show you where reciprocity already exists, while a tense one may reveal where you have been carrying more emotional weight than you realized. Your strength here is not measured by how firmly you can hold everything together, but by whether you can remain grounded enough to soften when softness is appropriate. There is a quieter kind of resilience in being able to protect your values without closing yourself off from what another person is trying to show you. The larger theme moving through this period is not simply what is changing. A more useful question may be, what is still worth tending? Some parts of your life may deserve renewed patience because their roots are healthy, even if growth has been slow, while others may be surviving mostly because you have become accustomed to maintaining them. Learning to feel the difference can help you direct your energy with greater care, rather than scattering it across obligations that no longer carry the same meaning. And remember that any reading like this is broad by nature. Keep what genuinely connects with your circumstances and allow anything that does not fit to pass without forcing it into your story. Your choices still belong to you, and no symbol or interpretation replaces your own judgment. Think of these themes as something to consider rather than instructions about what must happen next. As symbolic companions for today, consider the numbers 6 and 24. They can be treated as gentle reminders of balance, relationship, value, and the care required to build something that can actually last, rather than as guarantees of a particular outcome. The color moss green carries a similar mood, grounded, mature, and quietly alive, like growth that has been taking place without needing an audience. If you happen to wear or notice that shade, let it bring you back to the question of where your energy is taking root. Because that is where the deeper lesson begins to emerge. Knowing what you want does not mean you have to rush toward it, and recognizing that you need to change does not mean you must become someone entirely different overnight. Real transformation often behaves more like roots beneath damp soil, Much of the important work happens before anything visible breaks the surface. You may feel the intention clearly today, while the outer evidence takes longer to appear. There can be a considerable distance between deciding that something needs to change and living differently, with enough consistency for that change to become part of you. Habits need repetition, trust needs experience, and new priorities need room to prove that they can survive beyond a temporary burst of motivation. So if something inside you has begun turning toward a different way of living, give that movement the time and attention it needs. What is taking shape beneath the surface may already be more significant than it appears. Give things enough time to become real, Taurus. You do not have to tear down your personality and rebuild yourself from the ground up simply because part of your life is asking for change. If you want more order, begin somewhere tangible, a room that has become cluttered, a desk that no longer helps you think clearly, or a routine that keeps stealing time from what matters. Small adjustments may look ordinary from the outside, but repeated consistently, they can gradually change the atmosphere of your entire life. Just don't expect yesterday's habits to disappear because today's intentions are stronger. The deeper patterns usually take longer to loosen, especially the ones that once gave you comfort, protection, or a sense of control. You may know exactly what you want to become and still find yourself returning to familiar behaviors while you learn a different rhythm. That does not erase your progress. It simply shows you which parts of the change still need repetition before they can hold their shape. Relationships may ask for the same patience. If someone you love is trying to change, you might understand their process intellectually, while another part of you keeps asking, when will I actually see the difference? That question becomes especially difficult when you have already waited, forgiven, or listened to promises before. Yet pressure can sometimes produce the appearance of improvement without allowing the deeper issue underneath it to be understood. So pay attention to consistency rather than dramatic gestures. Real change tends to reveal itself through ordinary behavior, the conversation handled differently, the boundary respected without being repeated, the effort that continues after the emotional moment has passed. You do not need to rush someone else's growth, but neither do you have to pretend that waiting indefinitely is the same thing as patience. The more important question is whether something healthy is genuinely taking root, and this is where the atmosphere begins to shift. Confusion that once pulled you away from your own judgment may start losing its influence, especially if other people's pressure, mixed signals, or emotional turbulence has made it difficult to hear yourself clearly. Think of soil after a long rain. The surface can appear still while underneath, roots are adjusting to an entirely different landscape. Something similar may be happening within you now, quietly reorganizing what you are willing to invest in and what you are finally ready to approach differently. The Magician speaks strongly to that moment because this card is less about waiting for permission and more about recognizing what is already available to you. You may have a skill, resource, connection, or practical ability that you have underestimated simply because it has become familiar. Taurus energy often wants something to prove its value before committing deeply to it, and that instinct can serve you well here. But once enough evidence is present, continued hesitation can become more expensive than beginning. A project or professional direction you have been considering may therefore deserve a more serious look in the near future. You do not have to make a reckless leap, but you may be ready to move from imagining the possibility to giving it structure, a conversation, an application, a plan, a first concrete commitment. The Magician asks what you can create with what is already in your hands. The answer may be more substantial than you previously allowed yourself to believe. The Nine of Pentacles strengthens that message by turning attention toward independence, competence, and the material evidence of sustained effort. Something you have been building may begin showing signs that the work was worthwhile, whether through greater financial steadiness, increased confidence in your abilities, or the simple realization that you can rely on yourself more than you once thought. This is not about effortless fortune arriving from nowhere. It is about recognizing the value of what has been cultivated carefully over time. That distinction matters because receiving the results of your work can sometimes feel surprisingly vulnerable. You may be accustomed to preparing, maintaining, and improving, yet less comfortable pausing long enough to acknowledge what you have actually accomplished. Let yourself recognize what is solid without immediately searching for the next flaw to repair. Security becomes more meaningful when you can experience it, not merely spend your life constructing it. Strength adds another layer, but its message here is not about overpowering anyone. Your influence may be most noticeable when you remain composed enough that you do not need to force agreement, chase validation, or raise your voice to make your position matter. Someone around you could be responding more strongly to that steadiness than you realize. The softer your confidence becomes, the less it needs to announce itself. That same quality carries naturally into the Two of Cups. A connection may be deepening because two people are beginning to understand not only what attracts them to each other, but what allows trust to survive beyond attraction. This could involve someone new, or it could be a familiar person whose emotional significance is becoming clearer through a different kind of exchange. What matters is reciprocity, the sense that you are not the only one carrying the conversation, the effort, or the emotional weight. Vulnerability has a particular role here. Opening yourself does not require abandoning your standards or handing someone unrestricted access to your inner world. It can simply mean allowing them to see what matters enough to affect you. For Taurus, that distinction can be important because emotional safety often grows through reliability rather than grand declarations. When someone meets your honesty with care, instead of using it against you, the relationship has somewhere deeper to go. The Seven of Pentacles brings the story back to patience, but now patience has a more discerning quality. You have planted certain seeds in relationships, work, personal development, perhaps even in the way you care for yourself, and the near future may ask you to examine what is actually responding to that investment. Some things need more time because they are growing slowly. Others may need a different approach because waiting alone will not transform them. That is why this card asks you to distinguish purposeful patience from postponement. You may find yourself evaluating whether a job still deserves your effort, whether a relationship is becoming more reciprocal, or whether a goal still reflects the person you are becoming. You do not need to make every decision at once, but you may begin seeing much more clearly where continued investment feels nourishing and where it simply feels familiar. Your physical well-being can benefit from the same philosophy of simplicity and consistency. You may feel drawn to clean up your routines, eat in a more balanced way, drink more water, rest more intentionally, or become more attentive to what leaves your body feeling supported rather than depleted. There is no need to turn that impulse into an extreme regimen simply because you are motivated. Sustainable care usually has more value than a complicated routine you cannot comfortably maintain. Listen to your body as something you live with, not a project you must perfect. A nourishing meal, adequate hydration, restorative sleep, and movement that suits your circumstances may sound less dramatic than a complete lifestyle overhaul. But ordinary practices often become powerful precisely because they can be repeated. If you have specific health concerns, professional medical guidance matters more than any reading. The symbolic message here is simply to treat care as something steady enough to become part of your life. Work carries a similar lesson. If circumstances are already changing, pushing aggressively may create resistance that makes it harder to see what is actually possible, particularly when a manager, colleague, employee, or business partner has a different timeline from yours. Observation can be productive when it is intentional. Use this period to understand the landscape before deciding where your next effort will have the greatest effect. Look at the options in practical terms. What strengthens your position? What requires additional training? What carries unnecessary risk? And what could still be developed before you commit? Preparation is not the same as fear when it leads toward a clearer decision. The important thing is to avoid remaining in preparation forever, simply because planning feels safer than being seen taking the first step. If you are searching for work, think beyond the next application and consider the direction you actually want your experience to build toward. Updating your resume, strengthening a useful skill, taking a relevant course, researching an industry, or reconnecting with someone in your professional network can all become pieces of a larger shift. Your age does not disqualify you from changing direction, nor does having spent years on one path mean you are required to remain there. Experience could become material for the next chapter rather than evidence that you waited too long. And as your attention turns toward money, something previously overlooked may begin showing its practical value. It might be a skill you stopped considering important, a resource you have not fully used, or an opportunity that initially appeared too modest to deserve much attention. Rather than imagining financial progress as a door suddenly flying open, notice what has already been sitting within reach and is only now beginning to look different. Sometimes the first sign of greater security is simply realizing that you have more to work with than you thought. In the near future, Taurus, a financial or professional possibility may emerge from somewhere you almost overlooked. A casual conversation, an introduction, or an exchange that initially seemed ordinary could reveal a practical opportunity once you understand what is actually being offered. Your instinct to examine the details can serve you well here, because not every promising idea deserves your resources. Just be careful that healthy discernment does not become such a high wall that nothing unfamiliar is allowed through. The Nine of Pentacles brings attention back to what you have already built through consistency, experience, and repeated effort. Rather than promising money from nowhere, this card asks you to recognize that greater independence often begins when your skills and resources are organized well enough to support you differently. You may be entering a period when financial security feels less like something distant you must chase and more like something you can deliberately cultivate. That shift in perspective matters because it moves you from reacting to scarcity toward making choices based on value. You may also find yourself reconsidering what wealth actually means to you. Perhaps it is not simply a larger number, but more breathing room, fewer financial anxieties, greater freedom over your time, or the ability to say no to situations that no longer compensate you fairly. Like a piece of ground that becomes productive through careful tending, sustainable security usually develops through attention, patience, and decisions that make sense beyond the excitement of the moment. There may still be calculated risks involved, but they should have roots beneath them. The Magician reinforces this by drawing your attention toward resources you may have underestimated. An older skill, a professional relationship that has gone quiet, knowledge you have not used recently, or a qualification you rarely think about could become unexpectedly relevant. Before assuming you need something entirely new, take inventory of what is already in your hands. You may discover that the missing piece is not another tool, but a more confident way of using the ones you already possess. At the same time, be thoughtful about where your money goes. A purchase made mainly to prove that you're doing well can quietly work against the security you are trying to create, especially if the satisfaction disappears as soon as the transaction is over. Strengthening your foundation may be more valuable now than expanding for appearance's sake. A modest budget adjustment, a clearer financial boundary, or even an honest conversation about what your work is worth could have a deeper effect than one dramatic decision. This same question of value begins to appear in your emotional life, although in a more delicate form. Some interactions with a partner may expose differences in pace, expectations, or the ways each of you defines reassurance and commitment. That does not automatically point toward a serious problem. Sometimes tension simply brings an unspoken need into the room where both people can finally see it. The important thing is not whether disagreement appears, but what the two of you do once it does. If you have been together for years, you may already know that a difficult conversation does not have to threaten the entire relationship. There can be enough shared history beneath you to disagree, become frustrated, and still remember that you are standing on the same side of the problem. What deserves attention, however, is anything that has been repeatedly postponed because keeping the peace felt easier than addressing it. Familiarity can create resilience, but it should not become a reason to leave important feelings permanently unspoken. For newer couples, the first meaningful disagreement can feel much larger because there is less history available to place it in perspective. You are still discovering how the other person responds when disappointed, how they communicate when uncomfortable, and whether they can remain respectful when their needs differ from yours. Instead of treating that moment as proof that the connection is wrong, observe what it reveals about your ability to repair things together. Sometimes compatibility becomes clearest after the first moment when everything is not effortless. That lesson may be especially noticeable for couples who have recently begun sharing a home. Living together exposes the small rhythms that dating can hide, how each person handles responsibility, privacy, money, rest, mess, affection, and the thousand ordinary details that make up a shared life. Differences in those areas do not have to become battles over who is right. They can become opportunities to understand what makes each of you feel respected and secure enough to adjust. For single Taurus viewers, connection may develop most naturally when every encounter is not being measured immediately against the question of where it could lead. When you release the pressure to turn chemistry into certainty, you become more capable of noticing how someone actually makes you feel in their presence. Pay attention to the person who brings both comfort and curiosity, the one around whom you can settle into yourself without feeling emotionally asleep. A meaningful bond can begin quietly, long before either person has decided what to call it. The Two of Cups fits this part of the story because its deeper symbolism is reciprocity, not simply romance. It asks whether emotional energy moves in both directions and whether two people are willing to meet each other without one constantly reaching farther than the other. That principle can illuminate romantic relationships, but it can also tell you something important about friendship and family. Wherever mutual care is present, there is something worth noticing. And that brings the focus toward home. For you, Taurus, home may become less about the physical place itself and more about a deeper question. What makes a place or a person feel safe enough for you to soften? The answer may lead you toward family patterns you have lived with for so long that they almost seem invisible. Certain silences, roles, expectations, or ways of showing affection may have traveled through generations without anyone consciously deciding to continue them. You may begin noticing which of those patterns still create belonging and which ones ask you to become smaller in order to preserve harmony. You are allowed to respect where you come from without repeating every emotional habit you inherited there. Sometimes changing a family pattern is surprisingly quiet. It can begin with answering differently, asking the question everyone usually avoids, or choosing warmth where distance has become automatic. One small response can alter the emotional direction of an entire conversation. If distance has developed between you and someone in your family, reconnection does not necessarily require a dramatic reunion. A simple message, an old photograph, a shared memory, or a sincere question can create enough space for something warmer to begin moving again. You cannot control how another person responds, and reconciliation is not appropriate in every circumstance. But where there is mutual safety and willingness, a modest gesture may carry more emotional weight than an elaborate speech. You may also want to consider how easily the people closest to you can actually see your affection. Providing stability, solving practical problems, remembering what others need, and making sure things are taken care of are meaningful forms of love. Yet the people receiving that care may occasionally need to hear what sits underneath those actions. Letting someone see your tenderness does not diminish the strength you bring into the relationship. It gives that strength an emotional language. For those building a household, expanding a family, or deciding what family will mean in your own life, the emphasis is on foundations rather than appearances. The choices that seem small now, how responsibilities are shared, what atmosphere you want at home, which traditions you keep, and what kind of communication you normalize can gradually become the architecture of belonging. There is no advantage in rushing something you hope will remain meaningful for years. The strongest foundations are often created through ordinary decisions repeated with care, and perhaps that is why the smallest rituals deserve more attention than they usually receive. A meal shared without distraction, music playing while the house settles into evening, a familiar cup waiting on the table, or a few minutes when everyone feels free to speak can become part of what makes a space feel emotionally inhabited. These moments rarely announce themselves as important while they are happening, yet over time they become the quiet evidence of what you have been building together. Those ordinary rituals become the threads that hold a home together when life outside it feels uncertain. They create a kind of refuge that does not depend on everything being perfect, only on knowing there is somewhere you can return to and feel recognized. That same idea of preservation applies to your own energy now, Taurus, because you may notice a stronger than usual desire to organize, build, initiate, or finally make progress on several things at once. The motivation is valuable, but how you distribute it will matter just as much as how much of it you have. You may wake up feeling capable of handling an entire list before the day is properly begun, and that momentum can be useful if you give it direction. The temptation will be to treat every burst of enthusiasm as evidence that everything needs to happen immediately. Instead, choose the few things that genuinely deserve your best concentration and allow the rest to wait. Otherwise, you could spend the first half of the day running at full strength and discover later that you have little patience left for the people or decisions that actually matter. Think of your attention as a resource rather than an endless supply. Not every message, opinion, passing concern, or new idea needs to be carried with you simply because it crossed your path. Notice what remains in your mind after the noise has settled. Something someone said that changes your perspective, an observation you keep returning to, or a lesson that still feels relevant the following morning. What stays may tell you more than what was loudest in the moment. There is another side to this heightened determination that deserves awareness. When you become convinced that a particular outcome is right, you may unintentionally keep applying pressure long after another person has begun pulling away. A friendship, working relationship, or intimate bond can tolerate disagreement, but repeated pressure can turn a difference of perspective into emotional distance. Knowing when to loosen your grip can sometimes protect a connection more effectively than winning the argument. This is especially worth remembering when the outcome would clearly benefit you. Wanting something for yourself is not inherently selfish, and you do not need to minimize your own needs to prove that you care about others. The question is whether your preferred solution leaves enough room for someone else's reality to exist beside yours. Taurus, your steadiness becomes far more powerful when people experience it as reliability rather than immovability. If you are studying, learning a new skill, or preparing for an exam, this theme appears in another form. You may have been circling the same material because repetition gives you the reassuring feeling that you are doing something productive. Review certainly has value, especially when an important test is approaching, but there comes a point when repeatedly polishing what you already understand stops creating meaningful progress. Persistence works best when it knows when to change direction. Give yourself permission to say, "I know this well enough for now," and move into unfamiliar territory. A new chapter may initially feel less comfortable precisely because you've not mastered it yet, but that discomfort is part of learning rather than evidence that you should retreat to material you already know. Your mind needs open space for new connections to form. Sometimes moving forward is less about studying harder and more about recognizing when yesterday's lesson has already done its work. This does not contradict the larger message about patience. Giving something time does not mean remaining in the same place while calling it consistency. Healthy patience allows knowledge, relationships, and plans to mature while you continue responding to what they reveal. The near future may repeatedly ask you to distinguish between something that genuinely needs more time and something you already understand well enough to approach differently. In your interactions with other signs, a few dynamics may be especially useful to notice, though compatibility is never determined by a sun sign alone. Cancer energy may encourage greater emotional attentiveness, particularly when you need someone who understands why security and trust cannot always be rushed. There can be a comforting quality to this exchange when both people resist the temptation to retreat into silence. Whether the relationship is personal, familial, or professional, Cancer may help bring the conversation closer to what is actually being felt. Virgo may support a different part of you. Their attention to detail can work well with your desire to make something useful and sustainable, especially around work, planning, study, or practical decisions. The benefit here is not that you will automatically agree, but that each of you may recognize the value of making an idea workable rather than merely exciting. Just watch for moments when careful thinking turns into overanalysis and neither person wants to make the next move. And then there is Libra, another sign traditionally associated with Venus, which can bring questions of balance, reciprocity, beauty, and relationship into sharper focus. Libra may encourage you to consider another perspective without immediately surrendering your own, while you can bring steadiness to choices that otherwise remain suspended between possibilities. This dynamic can be particularly revealing in relationships where compromise has recently become important. The most useful exchanges are likely to be the ones where harmony is created through honesty rather than maintained by avoiding difficult subjects. Thank you for spending this time with me, Taurus. A reading like this is not here to decide what happens next or to write a fixed future on your behalf. It is simply a way of noticing patterns, symbols, and questions that may help you hear your own judgment more clearly. Keep whatever genuinely speaks to your circumstances and let anything that does not fit move past without trying to make it belong. Your choices remain yours, and that is where the real direction of this story continues to take shape. If this reading gave you something useful to reflect on, you can support the channel with a like and subscribe if you would like to continue exploring these readings with me. More than anything, thank you for the attention and trust you bring into this space each time you return. Take what feels valuable into the rest of your day, especially the reminder that strength does not always mean holding tighter. Sometimes it means knowing what deserves your care, what deserves more time, and where your energy is quietly asking to move next.